our judicial system works is case law is precedent. You have to follow what the Supreme Court says. You know, this is my interpretation of what a dog sniff does as far as invasion of privacy. You're bound to follow that. If the Supreme Court says under our Constitution this is what we decided, you have to follow that. You can't just ignore it.
Otherwise, the other side will appeal the case.
Exactly.
And then it'll be overturned anyway.
Exactly.
But I think that a lot of times folks, when they're concerned about case law, they think that, again, that maybe somehow or other it's creating some new version of what the law really says. And I have heard judges that I've been before, say that, this is what, what the law says. This is what the legislators have put together, and, I'm bound by this. And if you want something different, you're going to have to go talk to your legislators.
Talk to your legislators.
And sometimes they say it in frustration because it probably is an issue that they hear come up over and over again. Many times in family court, that's usually where you might hear this kind of situation, at least that I do. And yet they're like, well, this is what I have to decide because the other previous case law has identified that this is what this law means, maybe because it wasn't written so clear to start with, and so somebody has to decide what did it really mean. Right. And the legislature, well, maybe they need to make those laws more clear or change them.
And that's the thing. If the Supreme Court comes down and says this particular law is unconstitutional, I just read about one just the other day, and it had to do with is falsely reporting a crime. Is that an unconstitutional statute? And they said yes, it is unconstitutional because the way it's applied, it's kind of content-based. Because if you would report something good about a police officer, you couldn't be charged with a crime, but it's just because you said something negative, that means it's a content-based regulation.
Yes, I read about that as well. And I was very glad to hear that that was found to be unconstitutional because it's used as a club, actually, against people, and say, and then it's just a new thing to use. So.
Exactly. So that was declared unconstitutional. So now the judges don't have to follow that law anymore. But the legislature can go back and take another crack at it if they still want that to be a law. If you want your legislators to make a law saying falsely reporting a crime is a crime, then you need to talk to them. They can write a new one. They can, they can't write the same one, but they could write a new one. They could add something that maybe would pass muster with the Supreme Court. So it's a very complex system. It's very unusual to have a statute declared unconstitutional. Would you agree?
Yeah,
I mean, it doesn't.
So.
It doesn't happen that often. So when you read about it, you're like, oh, wow. I mean, that doesn't happen very often.
Right.
So.
Well, and I guess part of the issue that I have with that as well, though, is that, somebody may claim that somebody is making a false claim of a complaint, but maybe in their mind at the time, it wasn't false, or maybe they don't understand what the law really is. I mean, they're not the ones to necessarily know. They just thought they were violated or somebody did something they shouldn't have done, so they reported it. Well,
I think in like the domestic abuse situation, I think is where this comes into play quite a bit. A woman reports that she's been abused. She then later recants. She changes her story. She might say, I lied altogether, nothing happened. She might say something happened, but it wasn't as bad as I said. I didn't receive any injuries. He didn't say he was going to kill me. You might see someone who says something happened, but I started it. He was just defending himself. I mean, you have all those different parameters of what we call the recanting victim. Who knows? Who knows? Only the two people who were there know exactly what happened.
Exactly.
The rest of us, we're just left with the best guess, as to, listen to each side, try to tell which one's telling the truth. So a lot of times when that happens, there is that threat, that perceived threat, that I'm going to be charged with falsely reporting a crime if I change my story. So I have to keep following through, Even if I
Right.
lied, I have to
Right.
go up there and commit perjury to prevent myself from being charged with a crime of falsely
And
reporting.
so then ultimately, where's the justice in any of that?
Exactly.
And
Where
I,
is
and I,
justice?
and I think that it's really something that, you know, is so important for a judge, that when they're in their courtroom is thinking about how do you balance, as we were talking before, you know, the side that's got the high-powered attorney versus the side that's pro se, because you do want to have justice done, because if you don't, the whole integrity of our system is kind of out the window. And now I think they gave me a signal that we have another caller on the line.
Okay.
Let's see if we do. We got about 10 minutes left of our program.
Okay.
And I know we have a couple other topics we want to cover as well, but do we have a caller? Okay, go ahead. Caller, thank you for calling tonight.
Hello, and my question is on this same topic, is if a police officer or an agent orally tells you a fib or writes a fib in their report, are they are they liable for propelling that fib if somebody is charged, or if somebody else later on, another agent, reads that report and then charges you with the crime? How does that all work constitutionally? Thank you.
Well, I've never represented a police officer charged with filing a false report. The falsely reporting a crime means when a citizen makes a false report to the police about a crime. It doesn't cover the circumstance where a police officer may have lied in his report. Now, do police officers lie in their reports? Again, it's one of those, you have to make your best guess. You have to look at all the facts, look at all the circumstances. Does it seem credible versus the other evidence that you have? Do police officers fudge sometimes? Do they sometimes embellish? Maybe. Do they sometimes just make mistakes? Maybe.
Are there biases?
Are there biases?
Yes.
Exactly.
Could be.
Yes. People always say, well, why would a police officer lie? And I'm like, well, they got the person arrested, they wrote a report, they presented it to a prosecutor who's now charged someone with a crime, it's ended up in trial. They have a stake in that outcome. They want to be told they made the right decision by arresting that person and that what they put in the report was accurate. So I think they do have a vested interest in the case. We've got plenty of fine police officers. I have nothing against police officers. I think they do a great job of protecting us. Are they all infallible? No. Do they make mistakes? Yes.
Well, just like I think anybody within the judicial system has, which we're talking about now, everyone's human.
Exactly.
And people do have biases.
They do.
And they do have, like you said, they have perhaps a stake in their work product, and exactly how good is their work product. And I think that's, of course, something always, certainly, if a person is listening to a case, that's something that they have to keep in consideration. Now, I've been given the signal. We only have 5 minutes left.
Okay.
It goes by so quick. But I know one of the topics that I wanted you to touch on briefly. You touched on a little bit about why you decided to run, but I also want you to touch on, that since you have been in the courtroom a lot, what are some of the characteristics that you have seen in judges that you really are committed to emulating when you're elected judge?
Everybody, I've been asked, who's your favorite judge that you've appeared in front of? And I just had the joy of meeting with him again just last week. He's retired now as Judge George Peterson. And I met and I chatted with him briefly. And I really, if I could be like Judge Peterson, I think I'd be a good judge. He was thoughtful. He took his time. He would do his own legal research. He would be so thoughtful and kind of look at every angle and then and only then decide a case. But I think above all, he was kind when he was on the bench. He was kind to people. He was compassionate with people. He took time to make sure that people knew that he appreciated